Good evening, this is the Oscar expert here, back from the Cannes Film Festival, still talking about the Cannes Film Festival. All the movies I wanted to review are complete, but I saw a lot more there, and I'm going to talk about all the other movies that I didn't review right now. Let's get started. I saw R.M.N, directed by Christian Monju, who's known as the director of 4 Months, 3 Weeks, and 2 Days. And this movie kind of does what that movie did with examining the issue of abortion, with examining the issue of xenophobia. It has a very chilly, cold atmosphere. It's very bleak, and it has a very confounding, strange ending that kind of burnt itself into my brain. The more I think about this movie, the more I do like it. On one hand, the movie is kind of saying a thing that most people will agree with who decide to watch this movie. But I think that the way that it's examining this issue, maybe there's a little more there. And I would like to watch it again to see what else is going on, because I think it's an interesting movie. The male protagonist in this movie doesn't even move his face. It's a very strange character. And there's an unbroken 17-minute take of just everybody in the town arguing at a town hall meeting. I watched Holy Spider, which is from director Ali Abbasi. This is a thrilling and disturbing crime drama. It's actually pretty accessible, I think, to an American audience. And I think its greatest drawback is probably just that it's a little too straightforward. I kind of expected something a little weirder, maybe, considering that this is the director of Border. But in terms of just telling this story in a really effective way, I don't have many complaints about it. It also does a great job kind of pointing out how the underlying sexism in the society as a whole created this monster. I saw War Pony, which was co-directed by Riley Keough and Gina Gamel. This was a really absorbing look at the lives of a young man and a child living in a Native American reservation. It definitely offered me some perspective into what that world looks like, and since we don't have a lot of movies about that, I found that pretty valuable. The guidance from adults in this community is flimsy or non-existent due to these communities being plagued by addiction, and the young ones are left to scrape by. Everything kind of becomes a transaction to make another buck. But I also like that it didn't portray them as wallowing in their sorrow. They kind of think of this whole thing as a game, and to the audience it might be kind of scary or sad that they're in this position, but I thought it felt realistic. These characters never thought of themselves as being victims. I think the biggest issue with this movie is probably that it lacks a really strong resolution, but it's definitely worth watching, and the two lead performances are really great. I watched The Eight Mountains, which is directed by Felix van Groningen and Charlotte Vandermersch. Felix actually directed Beautiful Boy. This is a very spiritual, kind of slow burn movie about two friends told over the span of decades. It captured how confusing and elusive the journey of self-discovery is, and how weird it can be to try to figure out what makes you happy in the world. The cinematography really allows you to absorb and bask in the nature. It felt a little slow for me at times, and I wasn't always super engaged with it, but I think there's definitely a takeaway here, and I think it's the kind of movie that different people have different takeaways from. The Five Devils was a really good one from Leah Macias. It's a magical realism drama. Solid performances all around, especially from Adele Exarchopoulos. It's kind of a movie about a child discovering the past of her parents and how she feels about her relationship to it. And I thought that was a pretty unique angle for a movie to take, and I appreciated this movie quite a bit. The Stranger. This is a really grimy, dark, heavily atmospheric, slow burn thriller. I loved how this one was made. The use of deep shadows paint this world as dreadful and anxiety inducing and scary. But unfortunately, I don't think that the story went as deep as the presentation. The cinematography, the editing, sound, and score are all really good. And Sean Harris and Joel Edgerton in the lead roles are also excellent. I saw The Silent Twins, which was a little confounding, but mostly in a good way. There are a lot of bold stylistic choices in this movie. Some of them really paid off, and some of them hit kind of awkwardly. Really liked the stop motion animated sequences. Did not like the use of music at the end. It's actually a very strange true story about two twins who became unhealthily attached to each other. And they were very strange people with very deep, involved inner worlds. I do think there's a read on this movie where you can interpret it as just somebody's complicated relationship with themselves, but kind of represented as being about, two siblings. I watched Enys Men. This one gave me a healthy dose of experimental cinema at the fest. Has a very low budget feel. This thing was shot on a Bolex, and it sounds like they recorded all the audio on tape. And these choices give the movie a really eerie, folk horror quality to it, where like the sound and the image is just kind of dusty. Very psychological, very surreal movie. Did not understand much about it at all. Tried to piece it together, tried to take notes, made it like maybe 15% of the way there. But I actually look forward to reading other people's interpretations and analysis of this movie because I did dig it overall. I watched One Fine Morning, which is the new movie from Mia Hansen-Løve. I really liked Bergman Island last year. Didn't dig this one as much. Léa Seydoux is really great in this. It's a story of somebody reckoning with age. It's a slight movie, but the thing with Mia Hansen-Løve is I think she likes her movies to feel slight. I think she values the slice of life quality to her movies and hopes that people will take away beauty in these smaller moments. And I really did enjoy this movie, but it didn't leave the biggest impact on me. Tori Lokita was the latest movie from the Dardenne brothers, who are 2-time Palme winners. It's a very sad story about 2 refugee children trying to scrap together money through criminal means. I was very absorbed in it. It definitely had my sympathy. I think the actors who played Tori and Lokita are both really good. But at the end of the day, all it really had was my sympathy. I didn't really know what to make of the movie beyond that. I think it has a reason to exist because there's never a wrong time to empathetically observe people's lives like this, but sometimes it did kind of just feel like it was being sad so that it could be sad and we would feel bad for the characters. But I overall did like this one. Saw Tchaikovsky's wife from Kirill Serebrennikov. I had 2 things that I loved about this movie. One was the lead performance. Really great, extremely dedicated, kind of nutty performance. I also loved the cinematography. I thought this was like a masterclass in lighting. In every scene, the temperature of the lights, the direction that the lights were coming from and like where they were in the frame felt all very purposeful and was always fascinating to watch for that reason. I'm definitely fascinated by this filmmaker now, and I am kind of interested to check out maybe his other films for that reason. But the problem here for me was that the story was just so repetitive. 40 minutes in, we know exactly what's happening, and we know exactly what it's trying to communicate, and it just says this again and again and again and again and again. It has a really cool ending, but it kind of lost me as it went along. I saw Rodeo, which was a debut film from Lova Kivaron. Really loved the lead performance in this movie from Julia Ledru. She was just magnetic. You just can't take your eyes off her here. I liked the style too, but the story ultimately felt kind of like a typical person with nothing to lose joins an unsustainable criminal lifestyle kind of movie. And especially the end, it just felt like it forced itself into a conclusion that I've seen a lot of movies go in. But I did enjoy the movie overall, and I will be on the lookout for more from this director. I saw Sick of Myself. This movie had some really funny moments, and the lead actress was just fantastic here. It was nicely shot for a comedy. Unfortunately, it was kind of a one-joke movie where the main character is just very self-absorbed and attention-seeking, and that happens over and over and over. It almost seemed to reach like peak escalation of this joke by the middle, and then it was like, well, we have to keep riding on this joke. I think it milks the joke as well as it could have. Like, it gets every joke that you want it to out of it, but there's no movie that can possibly sustain this joke the entire time. There might be a little more depth to this movie than maybe I'm giving it credit for, but I just got kind of sick of it, by the end. Saw the new Claire Denis, Stars at Noon. I was constantly giving Claire Denis the benefit of the doubt when watching this movie, trying to figure out like, okay, what exactly is she going for here? I think it's trying to be about colonialism. I think it has the right idea, but I think it's sort of rough telling it from the perspective of these 2 white people and like their romance. I felt nothing for this romance, and I don't know what it was supposed to be doing for the story. Apparently some people were just swooning in this movie, and I don't even know if the movie was trying to get me to swoon. I think maybe you're supposed to feel the romance was kind of silly. Maybe you're supposed to swoon. I really don't know. I was just kind of shocked that I felt so little for this movie. And as far as I can tell, like what it's trying to go for, I just don't think that this like weird romance thing was the most effective way to go about telling that story. But Margaret Qualley is really good in this movie, and that was like the one thing that I was constantly like, that's great about this movie. And finally, on the bottom of my list is Brother and Sister. I was kind of on board with it for a while, but as it goes on, it just felt messier, and I just felt more lost within this story, and it wasn't even necessarily that complicated. It's just an endless stream of like French melodrama, Marion Cotillard's in this movie, which is why a lot of people were interested in it. And she's good, but I'm not gonna say it's like one of her best performances. It was just hard to tell like where the central development in the story was. And it was obvious that the core of the movie is that you have two siblings who viciously kind of hate each other that are forced to reconnect due to an accident that happens with their parents. So like, why did this conflict feel like it wasn't going anywhere for the whole movie? That's my question. By the last 15 minutes, I just started to kind of ask myself, where am I supposed to be in this story? How did we get to this point in the story? What is this movie for? And I think everybody started asking themselves that question like the last 20 minutes, because there was this sort of communal feeling in the theater where you could tell that everybody was like kind of like, okay, this movie's kind of funny, right, everybody? And by the time the movie ended, there was a little bit of laughing and a little bit of booing, and that actually made it kind of fun. And those are all the movies that I saw at Cannes. Thank you for watching. Thank you for subscribing. Which one of these movies is you?